Right now, though, let's move across to Wales because Jamie Jenkins is here, independent statistician, political commentator. A very strange thing happened last night in Wales, in the Senedd. Basically, they had a vote on whether to introduce vaccine passports, and they won that vote by one vote. However, there was one person, a Tory, who wanted to vote against them, but couldn't somehow make his link work over Zoom. So his one vote, which would have made it a tie, wasn't counted. So that, to me, sounds a little bit like jiggery-pokery. Jamie, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. And it does take a lot to get me kind of angry. And this is kind of really irked me on this, because as you've talked about there now, just for people who are not quite familiar with the landscape in Wales, the Welsh Labour kind of back in the national trend. They've been in power in Wales now for over 20 years. They've got 30 of the 60 seats in the kind of, and there's very little opposition because they've already been in talks with Plaid Cymru, the nationalists, over a kind of cooperation agreement for the next kind of 5 years. So everybody thought this would be a formality, but Plaid Cymru said they were going to come out and vote against these vaccine passports because they didn't like this workaround that you can have with lateral flow tests that can kind of get you around needing a vaccine passport. The Tories were against them, and we got one Lib Dem in the Senedd who said they were against them. And then we had these farcical scenes because what happened, as you just alluded to there, Mike, was that we had all these kind of votes coming in. There was one vote in it, and the Tory kind of member of the Senedd, Gareth Davis from Clwyd, he was actually at the Tory party conference. Right. So the question is, what was he doing at the Tory party conference, or why were they having a vote when the Tory party conference was on? You could hear the presiding officer as they were about to do the vote being told by another Tory member of the Senedd that she was trying to get on, and she's saying, no, 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 no. In her defence, Mike, she said that she'd made every effort to try and get that person in, including sharing her mobile number. But the important thing here is if he hadn't voted, it would have been a tie. And the precedent would have been then that the presiding officer would have had to have voted against the motion. So it would have been killed off. So I'm angry with the fact that this isn't about kind of anti-vax. I've had my both jabs. We've talked many, many months about the impact of the vaccines. It's pro-choice. I am with this. But these vaccine parcels, we talked about last week, there's no evidence for them. And this is just irks with me now with regards to what the hell's gone on.
Well, I mean, what's the legal position? Because Richard Tice this morning is calling for the Tories to try and get some kind of injunction on the Welsh Government to stop them from carrying this through. Because it seems to me that you could certainly make an argument that the vote was not held properly.
Well, there's that, Mike. You could also, I suppose, for a bit of balance, make the argument that why wasn't this Tory member of the Senedd able to get on Zoom? It shouldn't be that hard. Right. I'm talking to you on Zoom now. I just click the button and I'm straight up with you. So it shouldn't be that very hard to get on. But I mean,
you wouldn't, if you hadn't been able to, you wouldn't be the first person who hasn't been able to get through to us, because I mean, it does happen from time to time. But it's just rather unfortunate that it's happened in this very important vote.
And it is an important vote, Mike, because even, the nighttime kind of association in Wales now, they're asking for an urgent revote. There's nothing, I suppose, stopping kind of Welsh Labour bringing this back and having another revote on it. But, the chances of that happening are probably minimal. There's very little evidence. The reason kind of Plaid Cymru were against it is they felt that we should kind of look at it in more details and actually test it all out themselves. The Lib Dems were... It's very rare, Mike, in Wales for all the opposition parties, in particular the Nationalists and the Tories, to kind of vote together on a kind of issue. And for this to kind of then get thrown out by this one kind of technical vote in a way, it's just going to have huge ramifications on the population of Wales. And it's good that you're talking about it, Mike, because I don't think outside of kind of Cardiff or, the four quarters of the Senedd, very few people know what the hell went on last night.
Well, I saw that you tweeted out a BBC report from the News at 10 last night. They didn't even mention it.
No, so the main headlines, Mike, they I'd like where the News at 10 kicks off and they give the main stories of the day. Well, it didn't even get a mention on that, but they did mention some Russian actress that had gone into space, which seemed obviously more important than putting vaccine passports into the Wales. And then they did have a short item on the BBC News then where they went to the Welsh correspondent outside the Senedd who'd mentioned the fact that it was a very close vote. Did not mention at all the fact that he had all of the kind of this voting kind of fiasco. Now, I thought if you're going to report the news, the fact that this would have been killed off if somebody who said they wanted to vote, and remember now, Mike, this member of the Senedd had been on Twitter several hours earlier, stating his intent to vote against these. And so it was quite clear what they were going to vote for. For that to not even be part of the news story, you're just absolutely bonkers.
Well, exactly right. And I mean, I haven't seen much from that particular member of the Senedd this morning. I saw yesterday that he was saying he was going to vote against the vaccine passports, but I haven't seen him complaining this morning about the fact that he wasn't able to. Is he saying anything at all?
I've not seen anything, Mike. I think something needs to come obviously out from this, and the Tory parties in Wales are just saying that this was some technical issues, is across party technical issues. But the kind of the people of Wales want some answers here. And not just that, his constituents will want some answers, and it seems to be very quiet with regards to what's going on here. But it's going to have huge ramifications. They're coming in Scotland, and they seem to be having issues with the past there. They're going to come into Wales. There's very little evidence on them, Mike, and I think it's inevitable now. They're going to come in England in the winter months if the NHS gets overrun. And these things, we need to step back and take a look at what's the evidence. There is no evidence for these, Mike.
Well, I think the problem that they're going to have in England is getting actually through Parliament, because obviously it's difficult to know what Keir Starmer's going to do. But I think at the moment it doesn't look as though Boris Johnson could get it through, because there's a lot of people on the backbench of the Tory party who will vote against vaccine passports. But what's also not clear, Jamie, is how they're going to be applied, because I was listening to somebody trying to explain it this morning, who was saying it's not very clear which events are going to be included. What's going to happen, say, for example, if there's a football match between Wales and a country from the home nations? Are they going to need? Are the fans going to need to show some kind of vaccine passport? I mean, how is it all going to work?
Well, that is another problem, Mike. I think one of the issues yesterday was the kind of the app that they were talking about. It also said for the Welsh people that it was valid in England, not Wales, which, the app is bonkers with regards to, and you hit the nail on the head there, that if you're coming into Wales, do you have to prepare for that by getting a vaccine passport? And the other thing they put in, Mike, is that they've said, because they're not calling them vaccine passports in Wales, they're calling them vaccine passes, because what you can do is have a negative lateral flow test. And that's open to a huge amount of abuse as well, because who's policing these negative lateral flow tests? People could just put water on them and just say, "Oh, look, I've got a negative lateral flow test."
I see from the Times this morning that Sajid Javid is looking at very possibly changing the way people do these tests, and they might have to start doing them in front of a video screen on a kind of conference call, because I think the fear is that so many people now just do lateral flow tests without actually doing them.
Well, and if you look at the number of tests that's going on every day, Mike, we're over 1 million when you put PCR and the lateral flow test together. So who's going to be standing on the other side, to looking at these video conferences every single day? There's just far too many of them. It's an ill thought through policy, Mike. They've been brought in. I think Welsh Labour thought they would get this through quite easily. They didn't expect this, and maybe the Tory party in Wales themselves didn't expect kind of there to be this cliff edge with things. It's just absolutely shambolic, Mike. And I think, as Richard Tice talked about this morning, I have viewed myself that there's potential legal action forthcoming on this, and something needs to happen, Mike.
Yeah, it really does. Well, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. Jamie, thank you very much indeed. Jamie Jenkins, independent statistician, political commentator. Absolute shambles in Wales, where somebody can't get onto a Zoom call properly, so they can't vote, as a result of which vaccine passports have now been approved in Wales, but nobody really knows when they're going to be introduced and how they're going to be introduced and who's going to be responsible for policing it all. It's absolutely and utterly shambolic.